and we'll just let people join as they come. So thanks so much for everyone joining and taking your precious afternoon and evenings to come and listen in and join the conversation. We're building on a series of conversations that we've had over the last 12 months, effectively, since kind of the start of lockdown. And that's really all under the umbrella of Agile culture. And if you think over the last 12 months, you may have been part of some of the discussions that we've had over that period, but we've had a conversation about the survey, the results that we produced. JCURV, in partnership with True Sayers and Agile Business Consortium, ran the largest global survey on Agile culture. And the first series in that conversation, we discussed kind of some of the findings from that survey, including that if you've got a stronger Agile culture, it's highly correlated to business performance. The second conversation that we had was very much then focused on how do you strengthen an Agile culture in your organization. And we had companies from such as Lloyds Banking Group, Hargreaves Lansdown, OVO Energy, talking about their experiences of what they've done to strengthen Agile culture. And this is kind of almost the latest version of that now. So we're going deep diving into Agile leadership. And I guess the big focus here today is listening into, we're really privileged to have Simon Douglas join us today, and we'll get Simon to introduce himself in a while. But really what we're looking to do today is really just hear about Simon's journey of kind of moving from a kind of pessimist through to being an advocate and a champion of Agile ways of working. Okay, so in terms of the format of the session, probably going to just cover off a little bit about why are we talking about Agile leadership in the first place. Then we're going to obviously hear from Simon, hear his experience from, his context of why they even started looking into Agile. What was it like when he went on his journey in introducing Agile to his organization, and how did that feel for him, what worked and what didn't work to engage him and his senior peer group. And then also what was it like as he was sustaining the journey as they were scaling Agile up in their organization as well. Okay, I hope that works for everyone. Before we kick off any further, we would love to hear from you. So we're going to run a couple of questions through a poll and just get your views on two things. One, and I'll just wait for Emily to kind of run the poll, but one, it'd be great to kind of hear from your perspective, where are your leaders in terms of their strengths around being an Agile role model in the organization? So it'd be good to kind of get a view on where you think your leaders are, and you can score yourself if you wish. And then the second question is that what's stopping them from basically being an Agile champion or Agile advocate within the organization as well. So what's impeding leaders from doing that from your perspective as well? So if you want to run the poll, Emily. Brilliant, thank you. Should we just close the poll there and just to see? I think it's quite telling. So, so hopefully everyone can see the poll. I think we're having the right conversation then. If we all kind of see roughly, we were scoring our leaders or ourselves perhaps at about 2 out of 5 in terms of rating them on how good they are or how strong they are as role models and champions for Agile. And then, so that's really interesting. And then we've got another poll, which we wanted to do now, which would be great to kind of hear. So why are we scoring it that way? What's stopping our leaders from being those role models and champions as well? So what we're looking for here is just what's the one main factor for which is stopping those leaders that you've described there, embracing Agile ways of working. Brilliant, thank you. Should we stop the poll there? Fantastic. So hopefully everyone can see that. So I think mostly what's stopping our leaders from embracing that Agile ways of working then is saying, one, lack of awareness and understanding, and then there's this general resistance to change and changing their ways of working. So really fascinating in terms of what we see are the main impediments, and obviously that's a group of 50, 60 people saying something like that, and we definitely experience that as a consultancy. We're seeing those challenges too. Okay, so just before we kind of hear from Simon, I just want to quickly share a few things just to kind of share, why are we talking about leadership in the first place? And I think, probably in honesty, you've actually said that you've actually helped us answer the question in itself. If we look at, I'm sure if you've all covered off version 1's reports, every year version 1 does a report on, where are we? They get a response of about 40,000 people around the world respond to one of the questions they ask in their survey is that what's one of the major causes of why your agile transformations failed? And it's always fascinating, the top 3 answers of why the drivers of failure are pretty much consistent across all of those years. In this case, in the last one they did, company culture is at odds with core values, general organizational resistance to change, which we've just highlighted, inadequate management support. Yeah. And so it's, we know, and it's quite common, this is not just a UK thing, it's a global thing, and it's probably not an agile thing, right? This is just there's a general resistance to change, whether it's cultural, and obviously there's a strong element to leadership there. And actually one would argue that, we would argue that a lot of this does hinge on leaders creating that environment for this to be successful. So that's one interesting factor or driver of why we're looking into agile leadership. And if we asked actually you, when we did the last one of these coffee sessions as part of our State of Agile Culture, what's the biggest impediment for strengthening agile culture? And it was very strong in terms of the response came back, which is the majority of people said that what's impeding us from strengthening our agile culture is lack of leadership awareness, understanding and support, which is pretty much what you've just said today as well. Okay, so this just really highlights what we've found anyway in the research that we've done, the work we've done with yourselves, is that leadership is fundamental to making an agile transformation or introducing and embedding agile ways of working really, really pivotal. And it's not just us as well. Maybe some of you have heard about Project Aristotle, which Google ran several years ago now. They basically did some research looking at what made their teams successful and what made other teams not successful. And obviously there was a global survey. Google, they love some data analytics. They did lots of data analytics on various different teams they were running. And the big measure of effectiveness for them was profitability. So which teams are more profitable than others. And their findings were that there were 5 characteristics of what made a successful team very strong. And the most important factor was those teams which were really successful and effective had psychological safety. And that, we all know is that people feel they're comfortable to challenge, ask questions, take risks, test and learn, feel vulnerable, and that's what they said is what made the real big difference in terms of team effectiveness. And what was really interesting, if you read the findings, is that their recommendation, one of the major recommendations of how do you create that psychological safety culture within an organization is get the leadership on board to role model and seek continuous improvement. Okay, so it's not just us. It's not just our marketing department saying what we're going to sell next type of thing. This is generally, lots of corporates are finding the same thing. And that's really why we wanted to bring this conversation to you and bring you into the conversation, which is that, what's stopping our leaders then? It's quite evident that it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in terms of success of organization. What's stopping us from doing that? And hence why we wanted to have the conversation with Simon as well. Okay, now as we just go on to the conversation with Simon, what we'd encourage, if you've got questions, please put them into the chat. We'll filter them through as we go along. I'll make sure that we can cover some of those off. We're going to probably almost do the conversation in 3 sections. One kind of Simon, it's like, this is your life, if anyone remembers that. It's like Simon pre-Agile, as they introduced Agile to the organization, and then as you went through your kind of sustaining and scaling as well. So we'll pause at each one of those sections and see if you've got any questions from an audience, and we can build those into it as well. I hope that works for everyone. Okay, brilliant. So it'd be great just to get an introduction from Simon then. Who are you? And what's your background, and then we'll kind of go on from there.
Yeah, okay, sure. Thanks, Vikram. So I guess, incredibly, I've had over 30 years working in financial services rather than going through that CV. Let me tell you what I've done. I've worked in insurance sector, life and pensions, health insurance, I've worked in general insurance most recently, usually broadly leading teams of what I would call professionals, anything from teams of 5 to teams of 205, pricing and product development, but also wider marketing teams, doing customer insight, comms, brand, that sort of thing. And more recently, underwriting. I've worked in a mutual owned business, a shareholder owned business, a private equity owned firm. I've worked in a multinational reinsurer, and I've worked in a UK domestic business. So pretty diverse within my area of expertise, which probably just proves that if nothing else, I am at least adaptable, Vikram. Maybe that is all, I don't know.
Brilliant. And so I guess what we're going to do now is just walk through kind of the I guess your scenario. You were working for an insurance company as a senior executive there. What were the, what were the challenges that you were facing beforehand, and why were you even talking about Agile?
Yeah, I guess data is the lifeblood of any organization, and my area worked with data. That's what we did. So I was leading the pricing and underwriting function at Direct Line Group at the time, on the home and motor insurance business. You'll be very familiar with the brand. But getting at the data, having access to the data we needed, merging data sets, working with data took an awful lot of time. Operationally, it was onerous. It was probably the first time I realized that whilst I led technical teams, I was actually leading an operation fundamentally. And small requests became big bits of work and a huge distraction for us. We struggled to really fix it. We would tinker with getting things changed, but we'd never really make the progress we wanted. And I think the one which we ended up feeling that we just couldn't live with it as it was, we had a process to measure how our actual claims experience compared with what we thought it would be from the models that we were building. This process took about 20 days to run. It took 3 or 4 days just for the data work to happen, but usually someone else was changing something else, and overnight it would have failed and we had to start the whole thing up again, or didn't give us what we wanted, we had to start again. So it took 20 days to produce what was a monthly report. Just gave us time to get all the information into a risk report before we started the whole thing again. A little bit like the Forth Road Bridge and painting that. You never really get the chance to step back and do anything with it. You just keep going around the loop. That was where we first saw the opportunity to do things differently.
Okay. And so, why did you look at agile ways of working as a way of kind of tackling that particular use case?
So we've been talking to our chief data officer at the time, Nikki Klein, who had worked with this consultancy called JCURV before. So she brought them in to speak to us, and she'd had some success with them. She felt that this was a different way of approaching the problem that might help us to actually fix it once and for all. She wheeled in this chap called Vikram, I seem to remember, and one or two others. And they came and talked about Agile. They talked about some of the work they'd previously done on data transformation in particular. It was interesting, but I think my main recollection was, well, walking out of the room with my boss, the thought was, I'm not sure they do anything that we can't do ourselves, but frankly, we haven't really made much progress, and there's not much to lose. We probably ought to give it a try. So I think that's kind of where, when you talk about pessimist, I was undoubtedly not bought in. Pessimist isn't a bad word, but I didn't at that stage get it. I was just willing to give it a go. Okay.
So in terms of kind of that initial resistance, and obviously the meeting was had with a member of the executive committee with you as well, but your initial reactions, then why pessimistic? I mean, there's obviously a lot of benefits around using an agile approach. What are the typical challenges that you thought you were facing at the time?
Well, we did use Agile in the organization at that time. It was largely used for system development work, as it is in many places. We probably had 11 different ways of doing Agile in 10 different parts of the organization. But specifically, when I joined, we had a team working on, we were doing a transformation of our travel system, complete rewrite of our travel system. And I had some of my people obviously involved in that. And they were developing it on an Agile basis. And I asked them about what they thought of Agile. They could see some benefits, but they found it really frustrating that because the technical aspects of the system build are really important to them, they didn't have the confidence as they went through it. Because Agile was a little bit like that, isn't it? You don't write the full end-to-end requirements on day one. So there's an element of uncertainty as they built the system out, and they were struggling with some of that engagement, I think, and didn't. So they probably saw more downsides and upsides, and their view was, when asked, well, I can't really see how we would apply this in our area. I mean, I think I know a lot more now, but at the time, I had no other framework to work off. So that was what I went into that meeting with you thinking effectively.
Okay. So there's a lot, I guess, as per the team here said, is that awareness piece, is we not necessarily understanding what it could do, how it could work.
I think that's right, yeah. It's not possible really to get it, I don't think, at least I wouldn't, just from I mean, seeing what others do is interesting. Seeing how it works in other areas. Well, I'm sorry, my video's gone. Should come back in a second, I hope. Sorry, here I am. But the actually getting it, I think, requires you to do it, and that was my biggest light bulb moment as we went through the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I guess
talk about that. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, it'd be really good. Yeah, so I mean, I think yeah, it'd be good to just understand. So what made that difference then? Where you go, okay, what the light bulb moment goes on? So how did that happen?
Well, we ran a simulation. It was one of those things you turn up to and think, really, do we need to? Anyway, we went to the simulation exercise that again you ran from JCURV, where we built out Lego models. Frankly, that was what it was. But you broke the task up into the usual sprints, 3 or 4 sprints. And I think that was that was a light bulb moment for me, because I looked at the end of that morning. We'd spent an hour and a half building things out. I looked at what we produced at the end of that, and I knew immediately I could never have done that if you had just given me the task and told us, the team, the task and told us to get on with it. It would have been nowhere near as good. Because we wouldn't have recognized how, for example, as they do in business, the requirements are constantly changing, for example, and sometimes you don't actually know what it is that's needed until you've started to visualize it. Yeah. The opportunity to review how you're working, our second sprint building Lego bricks was significantly more effective and efficient than the first. We actually spent a bit of time talking about how it had gone. Getting regular feedback on what we're doing made a huge difference, because it allowed us to recognize where we needed to focus our effort on over the next period. Testing prototypes before we build it out, and actually starting to see the shape of a finished product faster. There's an analogy there with having early usable deployments, which is something we brought into that project later. I'm not sure a Lego model has an early usable deployment, but for us, you could see that you'd already built something that made sense to people rather than something that was just a bit of a foundation. So you really understood then how that might work within an environment. It was getting into a simulation exercise, literally for me, was a light bulb moment.
Mm-hmm. And so, I guess just for the participants on this call then, so people have scored their leaders a 2 out of 5, and then they've said it's lack of awareness, lack of understanding. And some of these, as similar to you, the organizations they're in, they're already using Agile, but the leaders don't understand it. So what would you advise, based on your experience, what are the things you could do to help get the leaders to the table so they can have a better understanding and awareness of things like that? How do you address that? Because obviously it didn't just take you and your boss, did it?
No, you need a bit of a burning platform, don't you? You need a reason to want to do some things differently. We had that on the project I described earlier. We just didn't make progress on something that really mattered, and we had to do things differently. Mm-hmm. Later, we didn't know this was going to happen at the time, but it was clear in hindsight that the organization itself had been thinking about moving towards agile ways of working, and they've now quite publicly gone live with quite a large transformation, which we may want to talk a little bit about to the extent I can later. Yeah. But their burning platform was simply one that is, you'll read it everywhere in the literature, our markets have never been changing at a faster pace. And our old organizational structure and approach was simply not responsive enough to those market changes. It was pure and simple as that. And when you've got a burning platform like that and a strong reason to change, you start to look for solutions. And Agile was the perfect solution for Direct Line Group as well at that time, just as it was for us at that moment for the project that we worked on.
Right. And then what, obviously, as well as yourself, what about your peer group? What were the typical challenges they were facing in kind of buying into this? Because, it's a relatively long-lived business now. From the I don't know what the foundings of it was many years ago now. So, what were their challenges of dealing with this? Was it similar in terms of just not interested, don't understand it, I'm not sure this would work in our area?
There was certainly, if we're talking about the larger organizational change, because I think what happened with the project was that we brought in the leadership team that had accountability for that, and we were all bought into doing it. When you looked at it more widely, actually what's interesting, because we had some success with the project and we looked to do other projects, and then in time actually change the way that the entire function was working, albeit just our function. It's actually very hard, maybe come on to that later. It's very hard to be an agile operating unit within a non-agile organization. But you could introduce some of the principles, if only to get people ready for change, which is what we aim to do. But it's once we started to do that bit, that's when some of the stakeholders were getting a bit nervous. Even stakeholders who were involved in the project work that we did and saw how it worked, suddenly got concerned that changing to an agile approach within the teams, we'd stop working with them the way we had. And it was a sort of an area where we were really the order takers at that time. And they knew that agile was about empowerment, giving teams empowerment, and they were just our people, not their people. How were they going to influence and impact? So we had to spend quite a lot of time reassuring them that would actually not only be unimpacted, but actually improved through the way we were changing the way we worked, and definitely, by the way, improved it significantly. Organizational wide, some of the other challenges I think would have been the changing role of a leader and what it meant for them.
Yeah,
not everybody was really suited for that leadership form, and I think also the fact within a larger organization operational change, you lose. So for example, if I take my area, for example, I think I'd go even further than to say that I was an evangelist for Agile by the time I'd gone through all of this. So out of my 230 people, when we moved to an Agile operating model, I had almost 200 of them move into Agile teams, cross-functional teams delivering customer outcomes. What it effectively meant was that almost everybody who was under my line management were not doing things that I was instructing them to do, which was a big change. How they did things was my responsibility, the craft, the governance and so on. But what they actually spent their day-to-day time doing, that was determined by the teams that they were in, which were not aligned to me. And that is a big change for people. It's a change to how they even view themselves, which probably can't be underestimated.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess when we think about, you're kicking off and you're introducing this with your senior stakeholder group, you've talked about, obviously the case for change was really important and that made a big difference. You talked about getting leaders to have a hands-on experience. What other things worked to kind of, switch on the leaders and get them interested in this stuff? And on the other inverse side, what didn't work and what put them off as well?
From a personal point of view, I think everybody's got different learning styles. From a personal point of view, I did a lot of reading. I'm a big reader, mainly because I've got a long car commute, I'm so used to. So I would just read, and I've always found that really powerful to learn others' experiences. I always find there's 6 to 10 things I'll pick up from any book. May not seem like a lot, but they'd be really critical things that I thought, that works for me, I get that, that's something I'm not doing, I want to try that and see how that works for me. I spoke to other firms that had done it. I spent some time with other consultancies. Sorry, I don't want to appear like I'm flying loose there.
What?
Colleagues, but
Yeah.
there are others out there as well. And I got a lot of breadth of experience from that. Every other leader had their own journey to go on. But I think it helped enormously that both for the project and for the wider organizational transformation, the leader at the very top was clear that it was something that we were going to do. So there wasn't really a choice to get on board, if you like. So it was for every individual to work out how did they get themselves in a space where they felt comfortable with the change.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay. And I guess just referring back to, I think, Carolyn, you just said that, you see a lot of silos in your organization. You'd really like to introduce agile mindset to the company, but where do you start? Simon, have you got views on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've moved company now. As you know, I'm now at Zurich Insurance. It would be fair to say that Zurich is at a much lower level of maturity. We got some people who really get agile here, but we're not doing as much agile as we were even before DLG's transformation. I certainly don't hear it talked about at a leadership level, and I'm sitting here wanting to build out agile capability again. I don't think I've got the authority to, or I haven't got the reason to make it happen. I haven't got the rationale, that burning platform yet as to why we need to change. For me, I'm not going to get a leadership team to go through a simulation tomorrow. They're too busy. They don't get it yet. But if I can demonstrate to them how we can address some of the challenges that we've had in the past by using agile rather than old ways of working, then it starts to become interesting. When I can start to talk about successes that I have had, that starts to open doors. People start to take an interest. Could that work for me? Then you can start to engage, I think, more widely. But you've got to start somewhere, is my view. So pick something that is really suited for this, that can work even within an organization that doesn't yet have an agile culture.
Yeah. Caroline, do you have any other questions to build on that?
Not really. I'm just, like I said, I'm new to an organization that I can see has fairly traditional thinking about things. And I had the good fortune to work for 3 years in a company that just had, lean and agile was in the DNA of the company. So it was just such a lovely and natural way of working. And now I'm just looking at, okay, where do I start? I mean, I'm in a group called Business Transformation, so it seems like it should be the perfect place. But right now we're just keeping the lights on in the company. And there's a lot of, I think that's one of the challenges when you start talking about improvements and ways of working. There'll be that, well, we just need to keep the lights on right now because we're reacting to COVID and all this stuff. But to me, when you're trying to survive as a business, maybe that's the best time to look at different ways of working and collaborating together and building that transparency. So, yeah.
Okay.
I've got to say, it feels at times, I'm sure you're the same, Carolyn, that you've had that light bulb moment. You've become an evangelist for this. It isn't different to having a religious belief. You've got to but like a born again, if you like, you've got to think back to the time when you didn't think that way and put yourself in other people's shoes. That's the challenge for me. It might seem now blindingly obvious to us that this is the solution for the woes of our businesses or the challenges that we have. But you can't just persuade them because it's the right thing to do, even if we think we know it. We've got to think back to what is it like for us when we're on our journey and how can we recreate that journey for them? That would be my view.
Yeah. Thanks.
It'd be good to hear from other people. Like, what other people found work really well, just in that first step of getting leaders really interested, switching them on, having that light bulb moment. What have other people found really valuable and powerful? Simon's talked about obviously the case for change. I guess having the space and permission to experiment perhaps is a good one. Any others found any other additional kind of levers there?
I think Narlin's got their hand up. Is it Carlin? Sorry.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, it's Colin. I'm from South Africa, so yeah, on our end, I guess the factor is like Simon was talking about. He's looking for that burning factor, and he can't seem to find it in the current company. I think for us, just simply doing the comparison of current ways of work versus the actual methodology. A simple statement there is return on investment as soon as possible. So me and my colleague we just finished, we did our Agile Project Management course and the Agile BA course as well done. So we found that in some instances, companies find the struggle in adapting the methodology because they can't apply it to their own business. So sometimes people will give this elaborate examples of agile work environments and how good it is. But if you can't tailor it to your own business or show the value in your own business, they'll never grasp or understand the need for it. So take current work functions, current business, your current logistics leg, your current products, and tailor it around that. And then your company is easy to see value and return on investment as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. So picking on those use cases relevant to the business and I guess interesting for the stakeholders is a really important thing. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Any other golden ideas from people in terms of what's helped turn on your leaders or switch them off as well? Because I think actually just building on that point, Kellen, is that I found, I'm not sure what you think as well, is that sometimes just introducing like the Agile Manifesto potentially can put people off because it's kind of like, what's that got to do with me? It's a software thing. It's a set of rules, which, you know, I've never come up with, and you're just beating me with it and saying we have to be this way. And obviously that's not necessarily relevant in the context of that particular organization. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, so just a quick comment here. So I think it's the fundamentals of big ticket change, right? So I think Simon was alluding to this. So the first thing I think you need to look at is yourself and how you're modeling, how you're showing up and how you're modeling that change.
Yeah.
And we call them the soft skills, but they are the hardest to kind of grasp. They're ephemeral, it's a bit nebulous, etc. But they are the most important because we're talking about human beings. And if you think about it, so the people that you really need to get on board are the most senior leaders, okay? They're the ones that are, you know, if they say, and I think Simon, you're saying in your example, actually, somebody at the top said, hey guys, this is happening. And so therefore everyone can know, here's the bus, you either get on or you don't. And I think that our ability to delve in and understand. So for most people who are in that level of senior leadership, they ever had to battle through and go through their own journey or a lot of challenges and be established in a particular way. So you're asking a huge thing, you know, if, you know, everyone on this call, would you give up all the things that are important to you, your house, your car, your family, and all that sort of thing? Because as I think Simon, you said, for some, this is part of their persona, this is part of who they are, not just in work, in life, with their peers, in their communities. And I think if you start to think of it in that way, the ideas of what sort of ways can I engage and the kind of conversations do I need to have with the people that have this influence, that can do this cross enterprise, start to, at least the conversation with yourself, and then it can start to play out. And then you test, you know, you inspect, and then you adapt.
Yeah. Okay. It sounds like obviously there's a theme around case for change. Obviously, you're talking about role model it personally as well, obviously. And I guess Colin and Simon were talking about picking that one or two use cases which clearly interest the business. Start small, as many people mentioned in the chat. Be agile. Use agile to be agile, sort of thing. Start small and then hopefully scale it up. Simple. So yeah, we hopefully, but yeah, by next week that 2 out of 5 should be 5 out of 5, right? Yeah. So what? Just on that point, then. So what got in the way, Simon? I mean, what's stopping people from moving, and whether that's yourself or whether that's your peer group on your journey?
I guess what's stopping me right now is the, if I'm quite honest, it's the lack of funding to do it yet. I joined too late for our annual planning cycle. I haven't got any money, but I've got some great ideas. We have in the past sought as a business to make change, and it hasn't always gone well, like working for 2 or 3 years on a massive redevelopment program that ended up not delivering anything. And therefore getting anyone to trust you to do that same project in a different way is better than the old way, but getting anyone to trust you full stop. And I think I got a sense of why that project was done the way it was, because I've been meeting with my stakeholders. I want to change how, because I'm doing the pricing work, I want to change how we deliver pricing to our underwriters to help them make good decisions. They have a problem operationally that they are working with lots of different systems, and it's quite burdensome, and there's a lot of technical debt and all that stuff trying to get stuff done. So they said, yeah, that's great, we'd love that. Just don't give us another tool to use. And I'm like, but you're gonna have to have another tool, at least for the first one, unless I do everything at once. And doing everything at once is going to be the same disaster we had last time. But I could see that's maybe why they went about it that way. They didn't want to have to learn new stuff over and above the stuff they had. I'm going to have to find a way to persuade them that we can start to deliver things that drive value for them. But I can't do everything at once. But they can start to get value early. And then every time I increment on that, it'll get easier and easier and easier for them. And I think that's going to be my in. I just got to get the funding at the end of the month. That will be the project that I will pick to demonstrate to the business that we can drive value and change in a different way. And that'll be really high profile if that can do that.
Makes sense. I guess, so we've got Agile introduced to Direct Line. You've started to running a number of pilots or use cases. As an Agile leader, it'd be really good to get your kind of views and experiences. What's the difference between just general leadership? Obviously, you're probably running one of the largest teams in Direct Line at the time. You've obviously a strong leader doing what you need to do. What's the difference between Agile leadership and just leadership, Simon?
So I think the first thing to say is there is no one type of leader out there. So it's a type of leadership approach. In a sense, it was actually quite easy for me. I went through my professional career moving roles same company, moving roles every 3 years, always doing something new. So something I hadn't done before, but in a more senior position. So early on, I was leading people who knew way better than I did what had to be done. So you start out having to get them to help you and to come up with the solutions. And you quickly learn that even though you might then learn what you think the right answers are, that's a disaster for engaged people. They still want to be the ones. They want to be engaged and involved in decision making, indeed leading it. So you learn quickly an almost agile approach where you've got a good sense of the work, but you're looking for people, you're looking for outcomes, you're not looking to give instruction. And Agile is a lot like that, actually, for me. What it does is it gives us some structure to that way of working, setting expectations, making your job as leader is to then make sure that the people that you've got in the team have the capabilities required to deliver those outcomes on your behalf. And that giving them permission to feed back to you is really, really crucial as well. One of my proudest moments maybe was my team at Direct Line when I remember sending them what I thought was a really helpful email suggesting a way they might be able to do something better. And I got told that's not very agile. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, you're right. What was I thinking? The very fact that they were willing to call me out suggested that we had reached a level of maturity, which was great progress, if you like. But it is quite hard to stick to it. But I've worked as a senior executive, and I'll protect the innocent, in a senior executive for an organization that was command and control. I worked with a group of extraordinarily talented leaders, and you got used to it. You got used to getting tasks. And I remember a new CEO came in, and he expressed the view that we should run a certain event. And then about a month later, it was 2 months later, it was a month until the event, and a sudden realization that no one had done anything. Because in the old world, the CEO would have organized that himself and told us what to do. This CEO just assumed that by telling us that we had to do this event, we'd all engage and get on with it. But they were a bunch of leaders. You'd think we'd know better. That meeting, I remember we all looked at our shoes with great care. So awful. And then in the next month, I've never seen a more engaged team working collaboratively to produce an amazing event in 4 weeks, which we had no right to do. But it just shows you, if you exhibit the wrong leadership behaviors, you can turn anybody into an order taker. And that lack of engagement, that lack of involvement in decision making. And it doesn't take much for a leader to break an agile culture. if they behave that way.
Yeah,
That I think is a big challenge.
Yeah, and just whether it's for yourself or other people, other your peers, what were the biggest challenges of kind of transitioning to that new way of working?
Undoubtedly, culture is the hardest piece, because it does require. I mean, we had some leaders. I mean, I have to say, I did leave Direct Line before the implementation of the agile transformation for a number of reasons, but there were definitely some leaders I left behind who I thought, you're going to struggle, I'm afraid, because you love the detail and the instruction.
Yeah.
And I think that culture is going to be the hardest thing for organizations to change. Being clear on what the behaviors are that you're expecting from yourself, for others to be able to call you out, and what you expect of people in the team, because actually not everybody wants to be empowered. They actually want to be told what to do. And if I look at the Direct Line transformation, they were effectively moving an organization from they had a whole bunch of round holes, and they created square holes, but their pegs were round because that's the way the business had worked. And many of them could adapt to become square pegs, but not everybody could. And that's been, I suspect, looking back, that will be a learning point. But you do your best to change that culture, the behaviors, the ways of working, and reinforce it in your role modeling, as people have said already, in what you say, how you turn up, how you respond to challenge. And I think that's the difficult bit. It's not easy.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So just there's a question which has just come in. I think it's from Nicholas. Nicholas, do you want to kind of just summarize what your question is? You were talking about struggling with management buy-in. If Nicholas is on mute, or I can summarize it otherwise. Okay.
Right, sorry about that. I was
Hi, Nicholas.
Hello, right. Yeah. Over the past year and a half, we've kind of like really struggled to gain management buy-in. Everybody seems to be structured on, say, waterfall approaches for projects. Everybody is siloed into that way of thinking, and functions only deal with their relevant areas. So we've had real issues of looking to develop and deploy IT systems out to the relevant wider world. And my issue is that management are still aligned to bureaucratic lines and are regimented to the waterfall approaches and to governance. How do we go about changing that mentality?
Did you want me to try and answer that?
Yeah, go for it, please.
I have a funny feeling you're way more qualified to answer.
You're the practitioner.
It probably plays to a lot of the things that have been mentioned already. I mean, how do you get the leadership to both see the need for change, first of all, and how can you demonstrate to them the way Agile can drive value? I think what happened, if I look at Direct Line, it obviously went from being exactly the organization that you've just described to something different. If I look at what happened there were lots of different people in the business doing Agile, finding it working, implementing success. That filtered up the organization as well. But there was definitely as well a burning platform for the organization to need to change the way it worked. And I think that's the bit that is harder. It's harder for people down the organization to tell the leadership that they need to do it if they don't see it for themselves. I'm not sure how I go about it. I might have to yet, but that's probably the hardest bit. And I haven't got experience of how you can convince a leadership team. But the more, if it's not coming from the top down, it has no choice but to come from the bottom up. So you've just got to start to get agile ways of working amongst more and more of the people in the business until it becomes an overwhelming requirement to change because of the success that you're delivering, and people will want to share that success and learn from it.
Yeah. And actually, just I guess building on that, just saying that we've got like 15 minutes left as well, is that, so if I look at Direct Line right now, you've probably got in the thousands now operating in that agile way. You know, from a few seeds which were planted. Just from a leadership perspective, what would you do differently if you could do it again? You know, what are the kind of learnings you've got, which you'd say, all right, if we do it again, this would have been even better, more efficient, more effective at how we introduce agile?
Yeah, I caveat by saying that that it hadn't gone live when I left. I have to say, Darkline went about it brilliantly. I mean, leadership stood up in front of the entire company, spent days talking to everybody about what agile meant, consulted with people in the business on how to make it work. So it wasn't like we're doing this, it was like we're doing agile, but let's work together. You know, we got an idea of what that might look like, but let's work together on how it's actually going to work. People felt part of that. You've always got your people who are resistant to change. There's always going to be those individuals. There's always going to be people who won't adapt to the change. But they were very clear, not just on the what, but the how and the cultural differences that would make. And were definitely involved in helping people understand what that transition might look like. So I think the one thing though, which was a pretty brave call, was that they did the whole thing at once. 1,000 people moved out of the structure that Nicholas just described into multifunctional teams aligned to customer outcomes, not technical experts aligned to functional disciplines. That is a big and bold change. A safer way to do it is to trial it in a ring-fenced part of the business, an operational function within a ring. Maybe do it for the motor business, but not for the home business and all the other bits of the organization. So that was a pretty big challenge. And that takes a huge amount of execution to pull that off successfully, because you've got to do all your learning at once. You can't learn in one area and then roll out that learning across the other teams. So I think that will have, I would imagine that has caused them some challenges, but I don't speak from any knowledge or insight. But it was the right thing to do for that business at that time and the circumstances that they were in. So,
brilliant. And just with noticing that we've got a few more minutes left, is any other people from the team here got any questions for Simon? Any need for advice or recommendations? So I've got plenty of questions otherwise. Okay, so if there's no one else, I'll get stuck right in front of the queue then. So I guess just one last question for me, Simon. So, you know, what would you recommend to, if you know we're all working with leadership teams, etc. at the moment? What were your kind of top 3 recommendations of how do you engage with leaders then in order to get them on their journey?
So I think I've talked about testing small, get started. I think you can't expect leaders to just buy it, but you have to persuade them to be open to it. So you can just, if you like, put the foot in the edge of the door, so they are responsive to what you're trying to do and interested in what you're trying to do, but you just got to be a little bit careful. They've got to make their own learning journey, if you like. So get them curious, get them open to the idea of change, and then demonstrate to them what you can actually do and help them to work out for themselves how I might scale that up as a leader within the organization. How might I see this working and deploying and giving me value more widely? That's the approach I would take in terms of engaging other peers and leaders in the organization.
Fantastic. That's really, yeah, it's great piece of advice. So start small, low risk, hopefully in a safe environment, and prove quickly to the leader or leaders that this actually does deliver some additional benefits, and hopefully that will then build the momentum, is what you're saying.
I have a question, Vikram, if it's all right for me to. It would just be interesting to hear. So you've talked about influencing your leaders. Be interesting to hear, looking back on, how do you think your leadership style has changed in terms of how you manage your directs? And did you see that change? And what are kind of some of the top things that you'd call out in terms of how your own sense of leadership kind of transformed from this experience?
Yeah, I think It's probably because, as I mentioned earlier, the way that my first employer built my leadership skills, that actually Agile is quite a natural form of leadership for me. But I have, as I've said, worked in organizations where that's not been an option. The bit I still feel uncomfortable with today, funnily enough, is not how I lead my people, but what the leadership expect of me. There's still an expectation that I'm the technical expert and I know everything that's going on. And I have to be really strong to turn around to them and say, if I know everything that's going wrong, I'm not doing my job. I mean, there's a great book, I'm sure many of you have read that David Marquette book about turning the ship around. The captain of the US nuclear submarine. If you haven't read it, definitely read it. And he made the point that the only thing that he keeps for himself is that red nuclear warhead button, because he doesn't think it's fair to let anyone make that decision to press the warhead. I don't actually know what my warhead is in my company. That is my challenge. I don't know what it is that I absolutely need to be responsible for, if I'm honest. But I know I don't need to know all the things that everyone needs to do, and I need to focus on outcomes. And that does leave me in an uncomfortable place in some of the meetings that I'm attending, not least Monday afternoon next week. So that's the challenge, I think, for me. It's difficult. It's not hard for me to be an Agile leader. It's hard for me to be an Agile leader in an organization that isn't.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks so much, Simon. We're just going to quickly hear from Pyle from the JCURV team, because as you know, we've been running the Agile Culture Survey last year. We're going to do another version of that this year, obviously. Pyle.
Brilliant. So thanks, Simon. Thanks, Vikram. Fascinating conversation. So as Vikram said, we launched the State of Agile Culture Survey last October or last November in terms of the insights. And, here are just some highlights of, what does it do to business performance? Which sectors in the industry are stronger than some of the others? And actually, how are teams feeling? So if you haven't read the report, I know the link will come out as we finish this coffee chat, so you can download your own version of it. But that's also made us think about next year's survey. So one of our commitments from this was actually to run it every single year, but form that baseline of where are the changes happening in the industry. And as we've looked at the results from last year and listened to your feedback, we're now strengthening some of the questions within the survey. So for us, the objectives going forwards are, creating that baseline and seeing the movements that are happening, but also strengthening and supporting, the industry and what is the case for change? What is that business case? We touched on it at a high level last year, but we want to go far deeper in this year's survey. The next one, and this is the kind of the black box, which Simon has helped us unlock and understand a little bit this afternoon, but really deep diving on, some of those leadership challenges and how do we really use some of the levers around us to support leaders, for leaders to support themselves, but for us to get the insight on what the actual levers are. And then the final one is that, as we all know, there's been a global pandemic, and this has lasted far longer than we thought it had. But actually, what are the benefits on organization agility? And so these are kind of some of the factors that we've strengthened in this year's survey. So literally today is the launch of that survey, and Ben will shortly share the link in the chat. So really hope that you'll spend less than 10 minutes to fill that out and really enable us as an industry to understand some of those metrics. So we're in a position where we can have those insightful conversations and help our organizations truly unlock value going forwards. So yeah, take the link, and it takes 10 minutes and it's gamified in terms of the survey technique, and really using neuroscience to help us understand not just what we think, but actually how do we truly feel on some of those challenges that are happening out there. Back to you, Vikram.
Okay, brilliant. So I guess I hope it's a real privilege to have got a senior executive in the room to talk about their experience, because I'm not sure about you, but I guess that we go to a lot of conferences, we speak a lot of places, and usually it's practitioners talk to practitioners, typically moaning about leaders. So it's great that we can moan in front of the leader here about what's it like, and get their views on what's it like on the other end as well. So I really thank you, Simon, for taking your time walk us through your experience as well in a really candid way. And I guess what I heard today was just it's so important to build that case for change, to get the leaders to buy into that. And as part of that is picking one or two simple use cases, as you've said, you've all said actually, to kind of hopefully get your foot in the door and then hopefully deliver quickly, so you can then build that momentum to do further work as well. I think, Simon, you were saying that it is really important of just getting the leaders to experience it in a very short, sharp way. I think that, as you said many times, right, that makes a big difference. And that doesn't take too much time. So there's definite opportunities, isn't there, to move your 2s out of 5 further up the scale with a couple of these interventions. So thank you all for sharing and getting involved in the discussion. Obviously, we'll be having more of these discussions over the next few months, especially when the next survey comes through. And it'll be really fascinating to see whether kind of COVID's helped or hindered in a sustainable way with shifting leaders' mindsets and behaviours as well. So really appreciate everyone taking their time out again. And we really look forward to kind of speaking and keeping the conversation going. All right, have a good evening all.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks very much.